And we're back. I know it's been a while since my last post, everybody. I had some family visit and it was a little distracting and I couldn't really focus. But I was able to work a little bit here and there. So what you see on your screen now is what we're going to be making. I'm showing you my render that will be going up on ArtStation in the future, just to kind of give you guys an overall feel of what we're going to be creating before we get started. So this is actually an image I took in Marmoset, and I'm thinking of doing a separate tutorial at the end showing you how I rendered this material in Marmoset Toolbag 4. Like I said, new approach. I'm showing you guys this is the finished product. This is what I'm going to be following on my other screen. So here's a 3D view of what it's going to look like. I should probably turn up my height scale. I think I used 5 on this one. I'm going to go with 8. So this is what we're going to be working on. So we have some bricks, we have some grass and some clovers, and it's blending into kind of this path. So it kind of dies, or the grass kind of dies, and then it merges into the dirt below. And we're gonna have sliders for removing bricks or cobblestones, and as well as a boolean here that I created, just a simple one where we can um, turn off everything and kind of just have like an overall ground. So it's kind of like a double material, I suppose. And I made this because for the image that you saw here, I had to create a variant where it was just grass. Otherwise, this material would repeat and you would see like another set of like these side bricks over here. And I didn't want that. I wanted it to kind of seem like it was a road or a path. All right, so let's go to our blank. So I had already started this file. If we look over here, I just have a grayscale 0.5 attached to the base color. This should probably be 2K. Everything else here is good. This is just the levels kind of holding it down. This normal here is set to 5. This ambient occlusion we're using. Oh god, why is this art? Oh. I made this tutorial or not this tutorial, but this material like a year ago. So I must have been playing around with RT. I'm going to use HBAO because it's cheaper. RT means ray tracing, so it's like ray tracing shadows. It's way more expensive. Okay. So yeah, we have a normal, we have our HBAO, we have our height. This levels is just empty, and that's pretty much it for the setup. All right, so let's jump right into it because we have a lot to cover. This tutorial was supposed to be kind of simple as a comeback for everybody, but I was actually gonna upload or record yesterday, but I wasn't too happy with it. I didn't want to make it too simple because, like I said, there's a lot of really nice simple tutorials online. So I wanted something more complex, and then I just went down like a 10-hour rabbit hole. And then I touched it up this morning, and here we are. Okay, so first we're going to start with a shape. So let's go over here. Okay, so let's move this down here. We're going to start all the way on the left to give us ourselves some room. So this is going to be our initial, let me just change this. Okay. Yeah, if you right click and you hit view outputs in 3D view, it's going to like basically take everything in this graph and feed it to your outputs because I had right clicked my other screen for the other graph. I have 2 graphs open at once. Okay, so yeah, so this is our initial shape for our brick. And then we're going to need 2 tile samplers because we're trying to achieve this herringbone pattern. If we look here at what a herringbone pattern is, we've all seen this. So let's see, I'm going to plug this into pattern input 1 here, and then this one is going to go into the bottom. So what's going on here is we have two tile samplers. One of them is going, the bricks are going in one direction, and in the other, it's going the other direction. So for the shape, here are the settings for the shape. Just a rectangle, basically. Then for the tile sampler, 10 by 10. You can do different numbers if you'd like, but if you want to follow along and then change this at the end, that'd probably be a better idea. I do have this set to two pattern input numbers, because if I set this to 1, then it's going to do this. But by changing it to 2, then it's giving us like a space in between. Also, we have pattern input distribution. I think by default it's set to random. What random does is basically, so it counts like 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and it's like every other, like it's kind of randomly distributed, that's why it's called random. But if you go to pattern, then it's going to do every other, so it's going 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then because we know that it's organized in that way, we can create this space using an empty slot that it's that secondary brick. So important settings here. And then I changed my pattern input filtering to nearest. I think by default it's set to this one, but I didn't want any of this gradient on the edges. So by changing this to nearest, you get rid of that. I think that's it for pattern. Then we move down to size. Left my X and Y at 1. You can play around with this if you want like some randomness in your brick. Scale 1.5, scale random. Nothing else there. I do have a slight, very, very slight positional randomness to it. If we turn this off, you can see them move a little bit. I'm going to go back to 0.005. No offset. That's the same. Everything else is the same here. Be careful when scrolling. I tend to move my mouse here because if you do have your cursor above like these numbers and then you scroll wheel, you will change your value. So just keep that in mind. You might accidentally move something. Rotation, 45 degrees, obviously, because I want them to be slanted. I have a little bit of rotation random. And then color random all the way up. That's by default you'll probably have white. Turn this all the way up. And then we do the same thing for this one. So let's go back to the top, just do a quick double check. 10 by 10, 2 inputs, pattern number nearest. Everything's pretty much the same. I think the only difference is that we rotate in the opposite direction. So we did 45 degrees, this one we're doing negative 45. So yeah, if we click on the previous one, 45, negative 45. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but this is like the very important part. I don't want you guys messing up these settings, because then everything else will kind of look kind of bad. Color random all the way up as well. Alright, hopefully I didn't miss anything, but if I did, or you have any questions, just let me know in the comments, and I'll give you guys the settings if I missed anything. And then I changed the random seed from this one's 0, and then this one's set to 1, just to kind of get some diversity. Okay. Then obviously we need to blend these two together. So I'm doing an add here, an add linear dodge, just to add them together, because we have these, these empty spaces here. So now we have our pattern. Then I do an auto level just to make sure I get the full range of the grayscales. I don't think in this case it's needed, but I always just throw one in there just to be safe. Now what we're going to do, if you remember the final result, we have, let me pull this up. These bricks here, they're kind of cut this way. So right now we need to cut our bricks because we need to make space for the side bricks. So I'm going to create a shape. And a blend here, like that. So here are the settings for the shape. Nothing too crazy, just a rectangle standing up. And then I used this and I multiplied here because obviously anything times 0 or black is going to give you black. Anything times 0 gives you 0. Anything times black gives you black. So black is 0. So we're able to cut away the sides here. And then I want to add some roundedness to the corners of our bricks or our cobblestone. So I do an edge detect, set to 1 and 0.5, and that gives us our rounded edges. And then I'm going to multiply the new edge detect with the previous cutaway cobblestone. And like I said, anything times 0 is 0, or anything times black is black. But in this case, anything times white or anything times 1 gives you whatever you multiplied 1 by, right? So in this case, let's say this right here, this brick right here is a grayscale of 0.5. So 0.5 times 1 is going to give you 0.5. So like, let's say this one's like 0.2 times 1 is 0.2 because this is completely white. If this was like not fully white, like some in-between value, then it would be a different story. So the reason why I do this is because I wanted to add rounded edges to my bricks. So I used the edge detect for that, and then I multiplied the edge detect by the previous thing. And because this stuff is this is now black, this is overriding these corners because this corner here times black gives me black, or times 0. So I'm able to edit this without losing any color information. So then we get our rounded cobblestones here. Then I use a scan set to 1, 1 to get the to turn this grayscales into black and white again, but I still have this empty, which I don't here. Otherwise, I would just be able to pull from this edge detect, but I wanted the black or the sides cut off. So now we have our bricks here with the sides cut off. All right, so here we can do a comment, and I'm going to call this one center. I'm just going to call it brick removal. So if you want to have like missing bricks later, you can just move this guy here, this position. Okay. So now we're going to pull from this shape here, and we're going to do an invert grayscale. Right now we're working on making the side bricks now. Okay, so we used this white value here, or the side black values to get rid of the sides. Now I'm inverting it. And then I'm creating a very thin rectangle here that extends from top to bottom. You can see the stats or the settings there. And then I'm moving it to the left to the very edge. And because this is tiling, half of it is on this side and then the other half is over here. And what I'm doing is I am subtracting this value here, this white, from this guy because I want there to be a space between the edges. I don't want the white to continue all the way through. Then here we use a new node that I don't think we've used in a previous tutorial. It's called stripes. Let me just show you the default stripes. Basically, it just gives you a bunch of stripes. You can increase or decrease the amount of stripes, their width, let me zoom in here, their softness, so like if you want like a bit of a fall off or gradient, and then the shift. You usually want the stripes and the shift to match values if you want them to stay like 45 degrees perfectly. If you change the shift and they're not matching, then you're going to get like slanted ones. So by using this, we create 6 stripes with a very thin width, no softness, and then everything else should stay the same. Then I scan it to get rid of any gradients. So 1, 1. And then I offset it a little bit by 0.125. And then I subtract from our previous thing here so that we get, I'm basically shaping the side bricks or the guard bricks or railings, whatever you want to call them. So then we have this. Okay. Then I want to get rid of more of it. I don't want my side bricks to be this thick. I want them to be a little thinner. So I create another shape. You can see the settings there. And then I move it into place. And then I subtract, and then we go from these thick bricks into these thinner ones. I also wanted to have some space here for the grass, because like I showed you guys earlier, the original texture kind of cuts over here. So I do want to have some of the grass showing, so I had to make space for that. All right. Then we do a similar thing that we did before. We have an edge detect to kind of round off our large bricks on the side. Then we multiply again. Same method. Now for this part, I want to be able to manipulate if I want to get rid of some of the side bricks. I'm just going to plug that in here, plug that over there. So then here we're able to delete or show more or less bricks. And in this case, I think this one kind of works the opposite. So if you want to remove, this is actually saying, hey, remove these, as opposed to the previous one. So this one works kind of like invertedly, if that makes sense. So if you want to show all of them, you want them all to be gone. You can probably fix it so it's like the correct way, but let's not get into that. Okay. So yeah, you can see here are all of them, and then here is set to subtract. So then as they show up, you're subtracting them, but if this is empty, you're subtracting by nothing. But yeah. Actually, it's kind of bothering me, but yeah, if we change this to multiply, then it's going to work the correct way. Where it's like, the more of these show up, then there they are. So I guess we'll do that. Change this to multiply. That way I don't want people getting confused. And then you have to change this one back to 1. So it's saying all of them should be showing up. Okay. So now that we have our center bricks and our side bricks, and I am doing spacings of 2 by 2 basically. And then we're adding this with this to get our, what I call our final pattern mask. So I'm just gonna frame this. I'm gonna call this one final pattern mask. Okay, so now we're gonna get into the fun stuff. Okay, we have to set some things up real quick. We're gonna set up our flood filly. Just set this up here. nicely for you guys. Okay. So I'm just gonna have a connector here. I'm gonna plug that into over here. So basically we're just doing a flood fill from it. And it's detecting the white islands. Anything divided by black, isolated, is going to get its own flood fill island. And then I'm doing a flood fill to random color to get this. And then I'm using a distance node to extend, to push all the pixels out. We've done this in plenty of other tutorials, nothing special here. And then I'm plugging in the original mask, the final pattern mask, as the top input slot. And then I'm changing my maximum distance here on the distance node to 5,000 just to make sure that all the pixels are pushed out as far as they can go. Okay. Then we need a slope blur grayscale here. We're going to plug that into the top. We're just going to leave this guy here for a little bit. And then we need a couple more stuff here. I'll walk you guys through this in just a second. Okay. So right now we're trying to have this. I'm trying to create some edge wear. Not so much edge wear, but like kind of like give our bricks more interesting shapes. Because right now our bricks are completely like straight, except for the corners. So I created here a purlin noise. Nothing special, just a default purlin noise. And then I use the transform 2D like I've done in many tutorials to just multiply by 4 to increase the tiling. You could change the scale here, but the higher the scale, the longer it's going to take to compute, and it's going to slow down your graph. So I just use a cheap transform to increase the tiling, because it's going to be way more cheaper. Because at this level of tiling, no one's going to notice the difference. And then I use a vector warp grayscale to break up the noise. That way that the noise doesn't carry over through each brick, so it kind of cuts the noise. You guys have seen me do this in a lot of tutorials, nothing special there. And then I feed this into the slope blur grayscale, and we get this. And then here's the settings for that. I'm using min mode. And then I'm going to use a scan. And it's at the 1-1. And it's going to give me this. And to get rid of this, weird white lines in between, I'm going to use a multiply blend. So basically what I did here was, we created our, I'm just gonna call it edgeware, our edgeware, and then I scan, and if you lower this, you can create, more damaged bricks, but I don't want it to be this crazy. I want it to be very subtle. So I just went with like 1. And you could even go a little bit more to just kind of give your bricks a little bit more personality, but it's starting to show how curvy this is, and I don't like it. I want it to be very, very subtle. And then, like I said, anything times black gives you black, or anything times 0. So I'm using this mask to get this black here to get rid of anything in between. And this stuff right here will also get cleaned up. Because right here, our bricks are actually pushing out than the normal distance. So this multiplying again with our final pattern mask. Because this is basically defining the maximum extends of the brick. So that's very helpful mask. Okay. Then I'm going to do a bevel to kind of give our the top of the bricks a little bit of a curve. And you can see the settings here. So we're going from this to this. It's a little drastic, but we're going to clean it up a little bit. And then this is something that we've done in a lot of tutorials where I create levels under it. Like that. I'm just going to do this here. I'm going to push this out. So what I'm doing here basically is I'm curving the top, and then I am doing a screen. And then you see the settings here for the levels, 0.8. and then I'm kind of raising up the slope. And then I'm going to blur it. And then we're going to clean it up once more by using this mask. Because now this is kind of our latest mask because it's got the cutaway brick. So we go from this and we use this to clean it up. And now we still have our rounded edges, but it's going to fall off where it needs to, which is here. Otherwise, our brick would like regenerate basically, and we don't want that. We want it to be a harsh fall off. And I should probably plug this in so we can start visualizing, so apologies for that. And then what height depth did I use? 1 second. Yeah, here. 0.01. So let's change this ambient occlusion to 0.01. And then let me just change this. I said we were using a height of 5. So let's do that. Yeah, so right now it looks like there's super large bricks, but that's only because there's no dirt yet. So that'll like even out as we start adding more stuff. So if we go top down here, we can see there are little subtle details on the edge of our bricks. Alright, so now let me go back to my other screen and slide all the way back. Okay. Okay. Now this is probably gonna be the most annoying part of this tutorial, and then everything is going to be pretty much straightforward. Actually, don't quote me on that. Okay, so we're going to start with another flood fill here. And we're going to plug this guy into it like that. And then we're going to continue this guy because we're going to need him later. And let's just grab all of this and make sure that our connection here is straight. And the way you know is because if you follow this line, you can see that it's going straight down. If you were to go one up, you can see that you're not straight. So that's how I pretty much know that I'm straight. The lines are straight. Okay. Now I'm going to need a couple flood fill to gradients here. So I'm just going to grab all of these. I'm just going to paste them over here. And then I'm just going to plug this flood fill into all of them. Boom. 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 Now if we look here, what I did is, look at the random seed. This one's set to 0, and our angle variation set to 1. I think that's the only thing that's different about all the only thing I've changed. But basically, as I go down, I just changed the random seed up 1 value. So this one's 1, this one's 2, 3, 4. And then I think I'm missing one more. Actually, we'll hold off. So yeah, so we should have a total of 5. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. Actually, I am going to do this. You don't delete it, but I'm gonna delete it just so that it's easier to copy paste. That way you guys don't see me connecting everything again. And then this is going to connect in here, and this over here. Okay. So let's go through this. So we have our flood fill here, nothing special here. Our flood fill gradient, and we have a bunch of different variations of grayscale, of slopes, I mean. And then basically what we're doing here is we are going to be taking these white values in our slopes, and we're going to be subtracting them from our bricks to get this. So you can see that each slope is a gradient. and we use several so that we get several slopes. And because these slopes are random, actually they're not all fully random. Some of them are variations set to 0.5 and stuff. But yeah, because all these rotations, all these slope rotations are random, then we're getting like a bunch of diversity on our bricks. Some of them are like this guy here. It looks like he's only being sloped from 2 angles. There's a third one here, but this guy only looks like he's getting sloped from 2. And some of these are getting hit from all angles. Like this guy here is getting hit from here, 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 but it's completely random. And you can see here the slopes. Okay, so this one, I'll click on these so you guys get the settings. Some angle variations are different. So this one's set to 1, 0.5, 0.5. Okay, only one's different. This one has some randomness that I just manually added, but it doesn't really matter. You can have whatever you like. Now, what I do here is I start from the bottom, and I blend these two guys with a min darken, and you can see what it's doing. It's taking both of these, and it's kind of like blending them together while retaining both slopes. And then I do that again. Like I said, now I carry this guy, and this becomes the new guy. And then you can see there's a third slope added now, so we go from 1, 2, 3. So we go from this slope to now that slope and this slope. Then we go into third slope. Now here we kind of got lucky and there wasn't a major slope. Yeah, it seems like these two guys are kind of the same. That's why you can see that there's no real, you don't see a fourth one, but it's kind of there. And then we just do that, we get a fifth one there. And basically once we go down the steps, or I guess up the steps, I have a levels here to kind of tighten up the values, because I don't want them to be completely, if I like hide this levels here, then all the slopes kind of meet in the center like this, and I don't want that. I kind of want to keep the center kind of flat. So then let me just edit these settings for you guys. We'll do 0.37. We'll do 0.13, and then we'll do this. Just keep it easy on you guys. So those are the level settings, and then we feed that into the blend. Again, min darken, set to 1, and then we get this. This is a really easy common technique people use for like stylized bricks. And then here, I am going to grab the... Okay, let's finish setting up our flat fills because there's a little bit more we have to add that we're going to keep using throughout the graph. And I'd rather just add it all up now. We have another flood filler here. And then we are going to pull... We're actually going to pull from a previous mask here. Actually, no, it's not previous. It's the main one. So this guy took over as our next. So we're going to call this one. And this guy is basically this guy, but with the edge, with the pieces broken off. So I'm going to use this guy to go in top of this distance node. Because if I use the previous one, then it's not going to account for the broken edges that we did. So we got to make sure we keep that in mind. So yeah, so this is a flood fill to random grayscale, nothing special here. And then we have a distance node set to 5000 again, and then we have an auto levels. Then below it, we have another flood fill to random color, like we've used one before. Same thing, distance 5000, and we use the same mask here. And then we need one more flood fill to gradient. We're going to be using this guy here for slopes later. If you control hold left control, click and drag, you can just duplicate that connection so you don't have to keep going up here and dragging. And then this guy is set to 1. And then I should probably change his seed, but it doesn't really matter because we're using this for a completely different purpose. Okay, nice. We have everything else that we'll need set up for the rest of the height. Time to pick up the pace a little bit. I'm just gonna copy this stuff here, copy. Before we paste, let's move everything back a little bit. Let's make sure our lines are straight. Okay, and I'm gonna paste, and then we'll go over this. All right, so what we have here, I should probably connect this so we can see it. Okay, so if we look at the before and after, we're adding a little bit of similar edge wear, except this time it's also controlled and it has a maximum extend. And I'll show you guys how we did that. So if we look at the 3D view here, we're adding just a little bit more damage. Okay, so the way we did that, first of all, we're going to be using this guy here for all our vector warp that we're going to be using for the rest of this graph. So I'm just going to keep that road or that highway started, and I'm just going to create connectors as I need them. So I'm going to pop one there and plug that into here. That way because without it, it's not really doing anything. Same thing that we used back here with this vector. Vector warp grayscale. Okay. So we start with a cells 1, set to 12, nothing special. We warp it with grayscale to break up the noise. And then I use a scan to kind of tighten it up and have some spaces in between because I don't want this happening on all the edges. And then that feeds into a subtract, but we need to subtract something from it. So here we took that secondary pattern mask, that black and white pattern, and we bevel it here. And then, here are the settings for that bevel. And then with this, I basically I use the levels node to kind of give myself this. I don't want to go too much into explaining it. You can kind of just understand what I'm trying to do or what I'm doing by just looking. So we get ourselves like a little gradient there. And then this is going to be used here to subtract where I want this to be. So like I said, if I remove this, then this damage should be on all the brick. Yeah. So by using this mask here, I'm limiting this damage to basically up to the solid white. So wherever it's a solid 1 or super white, it's not going to do anything there. That looks kind of interesting, but not what we need right now. So yeah, so we basically limit this to the edges or to the flat top of the bricks. So we use the subtract for that. And then we invert it because I want to use min darken. I don't want to go too much into it, but I invert this basically, just an invert grayscale. And then here I play around with the levels node. I'm just going to do 58 to keep it simple. And then I use min darken. Now, if I did not invert this, then you would get this, but then you could swap this to be subtract. It doesn't give you the same effect, but it gives you a different alternative. But if we go back, you can see the difference. So I'm gonna go back and forth. It's still doing something in that same spot, but it's doing it differently. Now, there's like something else I could explain, but I don't want to. This is already dragging. But if you just plainly subtract on top of like, let's say this line here, it's going to retain it, but it's just going to move it down because you're just subtracting. What I like about min darken that I've started learning more about is that this line would disappear. So if we turn this off, you see that there's a line going here, right? Like an edge. With min darken, it gets rid of that edge completely. With subtract, that edge would still be there, but it would just be moved down. But this does like a clean cut. Hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully you should, if you're not following along, but you want to try this method out, just throw in some random shapes and noises and just kind of try subtract versus min darken. Min darken, subtract, and multiply are all ways of taking away or lowering your texture or your mask or your noise or whatever. Add, max lighten, and there's one other one are mainly used for adding. So there's different ways to subtract and different ways to add, and then other ones that do other things. But yeah, min, darken, multiply, and subtract are the main three take away blend modes. Okay, let's keep going. After this, we're going to do a blur. Set to 0.25 just to kind of get rid of some of those harsh edges. Then I'm going to keep this going here. Oops. Now here we do a multiply. And basically we're using this mask again. This is the secondary one because it has the edge damage there. And because I blur, I'm basically artificially increasing the distance of my bricks or the extent. So I use this to correct it again. So I multiply to multiply by black. So here's the brick regenerating, unrealistic, and then we cleanse it again because we still want to keep some of that there. It's very subtle, but you can see that the brick here is extending, and then I cut it. Something to keep in mind. You always want to make sure that you're not going past the bounds of your brick. Unless you want to, then you don't need this, but okay. Now we're going to we're going to copy. Oops. Okay, whatever. Plug this in here. Plug this in here. Plug this in there. Move this down. I wish I could name or change the color of the strings. That way I could say color this guy green or something, and then we would all know that this is the mask or the secondary mask connection. Maybe in the new version that's already there. But okay, so here what we did is we added more edgeware. You can see the before and after, just to kind of add some erosion, some natural erosion. So what we did is we took a crystals 2, random C2, see the stats there. Then we blur it a little bit, and then we need to connect this guy to break up our noise again. 1 is fine, but I like to go 5 or 10. So I'm just going to do 10 just to kind of keep it all the same. So once we have this broken up noise, we'll use it to slope blur our main path or our main track. We get this, very cool. And then here again, I multiply to get rid of these white lines that always come up. So you can multiply to get rid of it using our secondary mask. And then we feed that into here with a copy, and then we play around with how much we want it to show. So play around with this if you want more or less of that showing. So I went with 0.15. And then we have I think I'm going to pause the video while I do this to save some time. So be right back. Okay. I saved like 2 seconds. So we're going to connect this guy again. I should probably, actually, now I'm explaining it, so that's a waste. But this is the secondary mask that's going to plug into the top here. And then we're going to connect this blend mode here, set to subtract. And basically we're just adding another layer of edge wear. But this is actually more like top wear. So I'm just going to say top wear because it's kind of happening on the top of the bricks, not on the flat side. And basically we start here with a crystal 1. We blur it a little bit, and then we have our, vector obviously. Just gonna plug that in. Okay, set it to 10. Then we do the same thing we did before, where we slope blur to get this stuff. Then we blur it a little bit. Then we invert it, and then we clean it up again using our secondary mask. We multiply. Then we feed that into here, but this time we use subtract. And then you can, if you want to go lower on the damage, you could move this around, but I went with 0.05. And then we get this. Okay. Now for this part, we're going to be adding some like more surface damage, kind of like it's been hit and it's chipped off some of the top. So I'm just gonna basically create a very simple, I'll show you, very simple setup here. We've kind of used something similar like this. You can see here the top damage. Actually, I'm gonna lower because at least for now, I'm just gonna go with 2.5. Actually, I'm gonna go with like 1.5. Actually, let's go with 2.5. We've kind of done this before for our what tutorial was it? It was the dark tiles tutorial. We have a similar setup to this, but this is a more simple one because instead of using this as rocks, I'm using it as like chipped damage. So if we do the on off, you can see the difference. Might be too many. We can always reduce it, but basically we start with a tile sampler. Set to 2.2 because these are going to be 4 separate rocks, as you see here. Set the pattern to paraboloid. Size settings, I'll let you guys pause and look at those. Positional settings, nothing changed. Rotation random, just a little bit. And then color values. I don't think anything really changed here. That's pretty much it. Then that gives us this. So then we do a subtract, and we subtract another cells 1 node from this stuff, and it gives us this. Where it kind of looks like rocks, right? Except we're using rocks to cause damage, basically. So then after we subtract, you can, if you want to make them like more sharp, you can go higher, but you're also losing more of the influence. Then I blur it a little bit because I don't want it to, if we look closely and then I turn this off, you can see it's a little pointier. So I'm going to keep the blur on, blur 5 to kind of, smooth it out. And then here, similar to what we did in the dark tiles tutorial, I take a dark, I don't know why I call it dark transform because of dark tiles, but we take a transform 2D, and then I divide by 2, so the x1 and the y2. Basically just copy these, because basically what we're doing is we're zooming in into each corner and isolating each rock. So we just do that 4 times, 1 for each rock. So we'll start from the top. You can see the settings there. Pay attention to the, well, this should all be the same for all of them. The only thing that's really going to change is the offset, because we got to change to all 4 corners. So here, okay, we'll start from the top. Boom. Boom. Bing. And bong. Okay. And then we have another tile sampler here set to 4 patterns. And then I'm using 24 and 24, and you can move that as you like if you want more or less. I'm just going to keep it as it is. And then we plug in the 4 into them. Keep that to random. That's by default. Here I play around with some of the size random to get some that are longer than others. Play around with the scale. Play around with the scale random. Blah blah blah. Position random set to 10. Offset 0.5 just to get more positional diversity. Rotational diversity set to 1. Boom boom boom. Mask random. Now here, you can also reduce the amount of them by just sliding this as you'd like. So I think I'm gonna go with like 0.5. So I'm basically removing half of them. And then your color random is important because it's going to determine, if we turn this off, it's gonna make them all the same height, which means all the damage is digging in at the same distance. If we increase the color random, then some of them are lower, which means when we're subtracting, these guys are going to make a shallower hole than these guys. These guys are going to go deeper because they're higher value in the subtraction. So yeah, you don't want all the damage to kind of be at the same level. You want some to be deeper than others. So, increase your color random. Okay. And then obviously we need to break it up. So same thing. Boom, 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 bing, blah. All right. So now they're you can see here now that it's gonna end here because that's where a brick ends. You don't want a rock to be sharing the same for both of them. Unless you do want that, then you could. Like if a rock fell in the center, then you would want that to spread across. But for this case, I don't. Okay. And then we plug that in. We get our surf damage. Now we're gonna do our cracks. And this is going to just be very straightforward. We need a lot of space for this guy. I was not kidding. Probably more than we have actually. So I'm gonna grab, I still have these guys selected. I'm just gonna hold control to select everything. And we're gonna slide on down. Make room for everybody else so they have room to sit. Okay, and then I'm going to grab these guys again, and I'm just going to move it into place. And then we're just going to plug, oh, I'm so hungry. Just going to plug this in. Let me just plug everything in before we jump into it. I don't want this to stop. Let's continue this road. I need one there. Set this to 10. And then we're going to use this guy for the first time. This guy here. We need another highway. And then this guy is going to be used right here. Well, actually, let's do that. Okay, now let's go from the beginning. And first of all, let me show you on off. You can see there on a 3D viewport, cracks. Boom, boom. Okay, so let's see how we did this. If you want a more close-up breakdown on cracks, I do have a cracks tutorial. I think it's tutorial number 3 or so. It's a prereq for the I'm blanking on the name for the concrete tutorial. Anyways, okay. Um, so I have a Perlin noise here, okay, and I'm using the Perlin noise to distribute my little tiny squares. I have 16 by 16, and the more of these you have, the more cracks you'll develop. I'm set to square, size 1, 1. The only thing difference here is the scale random. It's set to 0.25, and the scale is set to 0.1. So these are very tiny squares. This is one method of doing cracks, a pretty common method. I have my position on random and my offset increased, rotational randomness all the way up. Sorry, I'm not using this mask to distribute them. I'm using this noise to mask out where I want these dots at. If we look, okay, let me just finish walking you through this. Okay, explain this part. Okay, mask random 0.25, mask map threshold 0.5, and then make sure this parallel noise goes into your mask map input, also known as your MMI. I don't think it's really known as that, but yep, okay. So now that we have these little tiny dots that are scattered, rotated, and they have a different color randomness to it, we can use a scan jacked all the way up to turn them all into white. And now because they're all white, we can use that as our mask input because you need white values in here. And then we feed in our tile sampler into the source input. And then because if we don't have this mask here, like if we don't have this parallel noise, let me just turn off the mask map threshold. Then we kind of get this like even distribution. It's kind of like even all of these islands or all of these like Voronoi fractals or whatever are all the same basically. Not really, but they're all pretty much kind of the same. But by increasing the distance between these like having these void spaces in between, then the squares need to go out further to reach the next pixel or the next island because there's a void. If we get rid of the void, then the distance between each island, like the fractal, becomes shorter and they all become basically the same size. I will post a link to a Johnny M video where he goes more in depth about explaining fractals and helped me a lot for this tutorial or for understanding cracks in general. So I'll put a link to that in the description. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so then we use our distance here, and then we have an edge detect. But I turned this on, so I invert it. You could turn this off and then just do like an invert grayscale, but there's already one built in, so why not? Less nodes to worry about. And then you can see my settings there. So, I used an edge detect to detect these things and create a space in between, so you can determine if you look at the 3D viewport, you can determine the width of the cracks here. And then the roundness of the cracks. So where two cracks meet, you can increase the roundness. So you can see here. Okay, so these are the settings I used. Let's move on. These videos are already pretty long. And me saying random things is not helping, so I'll shut up. We have a crystal 1 here. We blur it, and then we subtract this Perlin noise from it to kind of create some diversity because I don't want this to be like even. I want to, have some randomness to it, some variation. We use a directional warp to warp the cracks so they're not completely straight. So we go from this to this, and then I just have another one here, and I just kind of warp it in a different direction. So there's an intensity and a direction. And then I histogram scan it again because every time you're warping, you're kind of creating some slopiness on the edges. So I use a scan to get rid of it. And then I blur it because now I want it back, but I want to have more control over it. And then I use a, actually, do I need this here? I guess so, just so that it's not so harsh here. So it's like a little bit of a better fall off. So we create a bevel because I want my cracks to, let's bring out the trusty old paint. Because right now my cracks are like this, but I want my cracks to be more like this, right? Because I want it to be deeper in the center and then kind of slope to the top. Okay, enough of that. Okay, so then we're creating this deep crevice in the center and it slopes outward. All right, then we auto levels to make sure I get the full range of it. And then I blend it a little bit. Or not blend it, I blur it a little bit. And then we have a Perlin noise again. If you really want, you can change the random seed just to get more diversity so they're not all the same. But no one's really going to notice because it's such a small detail. Then we use a scan here. Settings there. And then we multiply. Now what I'm doing here, right now our cracks are all on the same elevation. They're all cutting the same depth. So by multiplying this Perlin noise, I'm kind of giving it some ups and downs randomly. So you can see here, these guys are brighter than these guys. So that means these guys are not going to cut as deep. And these guys are going to cut deeper than these guys. So then if you're thinking about cracks, we're going to have some cracks that are, because by default, they're all kind of going at the same height. But by lowering some areas, then our cracks are going to be going like up and down. So some parts are going to be cutting deeper. This is the side view than other cracks. So that's good. Some good diversity, some good variation. And then I do it. No, I don't do it again. I do it once. Then I have a Gaussian noise. I transform 2D that puppy. And then I put that into the slope of a slope blur. Because now I want to give some diversity to like the edge wear of the crack. So then we get this funkiness. I like auto levels. I throw in an auto levels just to bring back some of the range. Then I multiply again with another Perlin noise just for funsies. This is a more noticeable difference in my height variation for the slopes. And you'll see this over here. If I get rid of this, you can see that the crack kind of continues here. But by doing this, then you can see that the crack kind of fades out. So this kind of gives it that fade effect where it, because it's cutting deeper in some areas, because this brick has a varying height, it's not like a flat brick, then it's going to cut, and then, oh, it's not as deep, and it starts to go up, and it's getting shallower and shallower until it fades. And then if this crack were to continue over here, it would continue where it left off. And I think that's a very cool effect because some cracks fade, some cracks are deep, etc., etc. All right, and then we vector warp it, of course, because we don't want the crack from this brick to continue to this brick. That's not realistic unless it was all one big brick or slab. Now, unless you want this happening, unless you want cracks on all your bricks, then you can unplug that. But I don't want cracks on all of them because that'll just look silly. I use this guy here, this grayscale, and I use a histogram select, and then what did I do? Another histogram select. I mean, I just did basically what this would do. Whoops. Okay, I see why I did it. Select gives you more diversity than scan because you can change not just the position and the contrast, because scan only does position and contrast. Select gives you a range. So you're able to increase and decrease how much you want to grab, basically. And then you can use the position here to change the grayscales. So typically with scan, this guy would stay the same. But with this guy, we're actually able to change. It's kind of hard to explain. Uh, yeah, just play around with it. Basically, if you have one set of grayscale like this, and you want to get a bunch of different variations of this guy, without having to, because right now this is all coming from this guy, and if I want a different like seed, I have to change the seed here. But by using a scan, I'm able to get more seeds out of that one instead of having to, copy paste. Okay, now I need another one. Now you could do this, or you could use a select, because it moves the range around basically. So, like for example, this guy used to be dark, and if you use a normal scan, you can only make it brighter or darker. But now it's like, okay, now this is the light guy, and now this is the dark guy. So you're completely changing. You're shifting around or you're selecting around the grayscale. Okay, whatever. So then here, I changed my contrast all the way up because I only want white or black. And then here I can also change, the mask. So we'll just stick with the default or what I had set up. And then I plug that into here. So it's like saying, okay, only have cracks on the white bricks. So now only white bricks. Don't make me look a fool. Yeah, okay, so this guy's white. Crack there. This guy's white. Crack there. I see crack on this guy and this guy. Call the police. Oh, wait, no. They're white. Oh, God, that came out so wrong. I mean, they're allowed to because they're a value of 1, not because they're white. Okay. Jeez. Let's move on from that. Okay, so that's cracks. Okay, so now our bricks are looking kind of interesting, detail-wise. And now we're going to be adding what we always do, adding some general height variation. We want some bricks to be higher than others, and we're going to be adding slope variation. We want some bricks to be sloping right now because they're all perfectly sitting straight, and right now they're all the same height. Okay, this part's pretty easy, so let's just get into it. Let's move that down. I'm going to grab this. Boom, boom, bing. Plug that in there, and we'll go one at a time. Okay, so now I want to add a general, and by general I mean height variation that spreads to all bricks. Okay, so we need something to plug into this level because it's disconnected right now. So let me just find out who we need. Okay, we need that same guy from before, this guy, who is coming from this guy. So just follow the highway, and we're going to plug this guy in here. And then we have a levels here with some settings. And now you can see that this guy over here is really dark, so he's going to be lower into the ground. So let me change my camera angle. If you go to camera here, you can go top to recenter your camera to match up your texture orientation. So all the way bottom right, all the way bottom right. So wait a second. Why does this look different? Hold up. Did I move something here? Oh, okay. I was a little zoomed in. Okay. Yeah, okay. So it's this guy. Yeah, because like this edge didn't look like this. I'm like, okay, wait, where's this guy? This guy should be there, but it was because I was zoomed in. Okay, anyways, dumb moment. Okay, so as you see, this guy is lower, and this guy is lowered. because of this guy. You know, we're multiplying. So we're using this random grayscale here. And obviously, if I hide this levels, then we're going to have like this super drastic variation, which you might want. That might be what your game needs or your project needs. But in my case, I didn't want the variations to be that drastic, except for this guy, black sheep guy out there. And maybe I guess this brick over here. But yeah, so right now we're getting some very subtle height variation. We multiply that in here. Boom. Next is what I call general slope variation. Let me just grab everything I need here. Oh, we're starting to pile up here with some connectors. Okay, let's just plug this in. I think I just made another one. Oh well. This is gonna go over here. And then this guy needs to go. Oh, we need another guy. Oh yeah, because now we're working with slope, so we need a slope, and that's not this guy. This guy's giving us just solid bricks. So we need this guy that we made all the way at the bottom, and we're gonna create a new high road or highway for this guy. I'm gonna plug that in there. Just organize these guys a little bit. Okay. When I work, I spend way more time making things straight. I probably had like 5 hours of just straightening strings, but whatever. Okay. Is this connected? Yeah. Okay. So now, if we look, wait a second. Is this correct? I think I misnamed this. Yeah, I think I accidentally named this the wrong thing. This should be wait, did I? No, I didn't. Hold on. What am I feeding into it? Yeah, how about we just okay, no I'm not. It just does it's just very subtle. Okay, yeah, no, okay. Sorry, it's just very subtle. It was hard to tell what was actually happening. Okay, so right, so we took this guy here, and actually I'm gonna feed it through an auto levels just to get more out of it. It's very subtle, but there is a difference. Okay, yeah, because if you do our levels here, you can see that there's some. This means that it's not utilizing this little bit of grayscale. And then when I do an auto levels, and then if you look at that thin area there and I plug this in, you can see that it's gone because now it's using the full range of that. Also, if you don't want to use an auto level node, you can just hit this guy here and it'll auto it for you. And basically it does the same thing that an auto level does. You can hit this guy here, which is also called auto level. Or you can do invert here, which is an invert grayscale, but it's built into the levels. Levels just does a bunch of little things that these little guys do. But if you don't want to use an entire levels node, you can use these little guys. Anyways, okay. So we took that gradient guy with the auto levels and we multiplied it. And now you can see that everything is sloping. So if I turn this all the way up, now you can see the slopes here clearly, right? Like this side is definitely darker than this side. And if we look over here, the slope goes that way, right? Like the darkness is here and there. That's if I have this set all the way to 1, which I didn't want to do. I wanted to use 0.4. And then I don't want all of my bricks to be sloping. I want some of them. So same thing here. I used the histogram select to isolate some bricks, or I guess remove some bricks. And then I feed that into here, and then it's only happening. You can see that these bricks are kind of still laying the same height and then all of these are darker because those are all sloping except for these white ones here. Okay, and then the ones that were not sloping or that were excluded, so these guys, I'm going to invert it because I do want them to slope, but I want them to slope a more drastic amount than the general public or the general slope. So I want to use these. I want to use I want to use these black bricks here. So I invert it. So now they're being masked, and then I feed that into here. But I need to plug something up top here, or it's gonna look weird. So we're gonna continue this and plug that in there. Okay. So now if we turn this on and off, these guys are sloping a lot more than the previous guys. You can make them even slope even more by going all the way to 1, but I'm going to go with 0.9. Okay. So I think that's it for height and sloping, or height variation and sloping. So now, right now, all our bricks are kind of laying in the same elevation. But I want these guys, the railing bricks, to be higher than the herringbone pattern bricks. So I'm going to raise the sides basically. So that's what this is, sides raised, or sides raised. Plug all this in. Boom, boom, boom. Now, right now I'm raising everything. So I need a mask so that I only raise the sides. So where is our sides only mask? Right here. And make sure you use this one. I'm just going to drag this here. Boom, boom, boom. And then we need this guy all the way over here. And then we're going to plug this into opacity. And to make it connected, I don't know if I mentioned this in this tutorial. I click and drag, and then I press Alt, and then you can create a connector. I try to mention it at least once per tutorial, because I know not everyone watches all of them in the same order, so just in case you're new. All right. So if we hide and unhide, you can see that these guys are brought up. And you can also see that in the 3D viewport. After we did our sloping stuff here, I added a levels node and I kind of brought everything down. I lowered everything because everything in Substance Designer works between 0 and 1. So I have to make space because right now they're all kind of reaching 1, like the maximum height, like they're reaching the ceiling. So by lowering everything, I create more space between like their heads and the ceiling. So by creating more space, that means that I can now raise the sides and their heads won't hit the ceiling. So I lower everything and then I bring them back up while keeping the herringbone pattern on the floor or lower. All right, so I have a levels here. Boom, boom, boom. This is me lowering everything. And you could even lower it more. But remember, when we're going to be increasing, we can probably do it now. We're going to be increasing our height scale. This is basically saying that you're increasing the range of the floor and the ceiling, so between 0 and 1. By increasing the height scale, you're moving where 1 is. So you're moving the ceiling up, but you're not increasing the distance between 0 and 1. It's still 0 and 1, but you're increasing how high 1 is. Right? So now you're saying the ceiling is up here, or 1 is up here, and 0 is here. It's still 0 to 1, right? But you're extending the range. So the higher this is, the more noticeable height differences become because you're increasing it. And the lower this is, it's still 0 to 1, but there's less room to play with There's less room between the floor and the ceiling. So we need to give them some space. So I'm going to move this back up to 5. Because that's what we'll be working with going forward. So now this looks higher than this stuff. And we can even lower the herringbone pattern a little bit more. Let's go with like 0.5. And then we can raise these guys more. So let's go with like 425. Now you don't want to go too high up because you'll start flattening them because they're going to hit the ceiling. And whatever hits the ceiling first will stop, and then everything else behind it will keep, like if we increase this all the way, like it's all hit the ceiling, so that's completely flat because it can't go any further. So you have to make sure you don't want to go too high. But I'm gonna change. These aren't the settings I use, but I'm just gonna change them a little bit just to make the difference between the guard bricks and the herringbone bricks a little bit more noticeable. If that causes problems, we'll revert back. But okay, so yeah, so these are the level settings, and then I scan it, I blur it a little bit, and then I use another levels here to lower this guy because we're screening these guys below the main bricks. So keep that at 1. And then we're using, that mask from earlier. Okay, sorry, I spent way more time than I wanted on that. Okay, we are we getting to the end? Yeah, we're in the last 20%, 25%. Okay, let me just look at this real quick. Be right back. All right, we're gonna take this a little bit slow. Not too much, but just a little bit, because let's get a little messy here. So right now, so that's it for anything brick related. Now we're moving on to the dirt / grass / floor. Okay, so I'm just gonna paste it all in here. Don't be scared. It's nothing complicated. It's all very simple nodes. Plug that in there. Plug that in there. Get rid of that guy. Okay. So you can see here now that a lot of the bricks are gone. So I'm going to turn it off and on just to show you the before and after. So what's happening here is we're adding the floor or the ground. So we're going to start with a Perlin noise, default Perlin noise. So right now this is the ground that we're making. Slope blur grayscale, just playing with it, nothing too crazy. We're slope blurring it by itself to create this funky pattern. Then we do another slope blur with a Gaussian noise. You can make your own if you'd like. This is just what I threw together. Another slope blur. You can see the settings there. Then I non-uniform blur grayscale this, non-uniform. Turn your samples and your blades up. This is basically your resolution. Then here I rotate it. I rotate this. Then I rotated it because I want to use min darken between these two to get this. So we go from this to this, and I just rotated it just to tile it or increase the tiling or the amount. Then I blur it. Then I auto level it to bring back the full range. And then I lower the range again. And I just kind of bring up the, the level out high, I think. Yeah, this guy here, to 0.5. And then I do a copy, 0.15 on the opacity. We have a clouds 2. We blur the clouds 2 a little bit. Then we copy. Now you're probably thinking, wow, how did you decide to put all these together? Some of this is just random and a lot of trial and error. I just throw in a bunch of different noisy textures and I plug them in. I see if I kind of get a cool effect. This isn't fully thought out, oh, this is what I want. I just wanted to create something, somewhat interesting for the ground. Nothing too crazy because this isn't really like a ground focused material. Okay, so then I bring in a little bit of that clouds to blurred clouds too, 0.15. Then I have a moisture noise here. I slope blur it to kind of create like this opaque window type effect. Slope blur grayscale, min mode, and then I do another one by itself, just back to back, just slapping a lot of these on. I don't remember doing this. And then I blur it a little bit, and then I levels here. Just gonna change this to 0.91. And then I multiply this guy with this guy, and then we kind of get this guy. And then I do a histogram range just to decrease what a histogram range does. By changing the range, you're saying decrease the range between the ceiling and or clamping the range between the ceiling and the floor. So if you increase this all the way up, you're getting the full range, and if you squeeze these, you're changing the black and the white, and you're kind of squishing it. You're still getting black and white, but you're getting less of it. So if I hide this, then you can see there's a bigger difference on the ground. It's a lot more like, let's go back over here. So before the range, this is what our ground is doing. But by putting it through the range, we're basically saying limit it to just here. So instead of getting this big holes, now we're decreasing the frequency, or not the frequency, but how, there's a name for it, I don't know. I wasn't paying attention in class. We're decreasing the range between the top and the bottom. It's still 0 and 1, but now it's, you get it. Blowing your guys' brains up with how many times I'm saying that. This is actually more interesting. We'll come back to this. It's kind of hard to tell because it's not colored, but this is actually a little cooler because it's kind of like the ground has kind of overtaken these guys. But we're gonna stick to the tutorial. So 0.5, 0.5. Then we level it. Basically just change. Now this is what you're gonna use for lowering and increasing your ground level. So we're gonna call this ground level. And look at the ground here. And if we just turn this up, you can determine how much the ground is going to be eating the bricks. So that's really cool. Now I'm doing this the manual way. There is a node called height blend. And you can place it at the bottom and this on top. And then it basically does it for you. Or I think it might be. I never know which way they plug in. Yeah, I think this looks better. But I'm not a big fan of this because it does a lot of like behind the scenes work for you. I don't think it's a bad node. I prefer to do it manually, so I use this blend mode here, and it's max lighten. That's basically what that node is doing. But yeah, max lighten, and then I don't mess with this. I like to do it in here to determine the ground level. Okay. So now that we have our ground attached, we need to create a mask for our bricks now. So before we've had two masks for the bricks. Now we need a third new one, quote unquote, because our bricks, some of them are being swallowed by the ground. So we need a mask that tells us where are the bricks now. So I'm going to create a subtract blend up here, and then I'm going to plug this guy onto the top. And this ground level guy is going to go in the middle. And then that's going to give us a result. So now this is giving us our dirt. And then I'm going to do a scan. And I am going to jack this up to 1, 1. So now this is giving us a binary mask of our dirt. So if you see, we've done this in plenty of tutorials before. So if you look here, if I increase the dirt level, you can see our bricks are being swallowed up. So this is an adaptive mask. Whatever happened, whatever changes here will change here. So that's very good. I'm trying to think if I want to add this part into the tutorial. Let me think about it. All right, I've decided we're just gonna get into it. We're just gonna do this part. Basically, let me just bring it in. Now we did do something similar to this in the concrete tutorial, where we added booleans into our graph so that we can on the fly change between basically different variations of the material. So I created a boolean called ground only question mark, and let me just plug this in. Okay, let me show you how this works. Let me plug it in and I'll show you how it works. This goes in here. And then we gotta connect this here. Okay. So, how do I? Okay. If you spawn in if you look for the switch, there's two of them you have to that we'll be using: switch color and grayscale. If you're working with color or the orange input or outputs, you're gonna need switch color. If you're working with grayscale, so like roughness, height, etc., you're gonna be working with switch grayscale. So spawn in is switch grayscale, and this is basically a boolean. It's a switch between true and false. So input 1, the top one is true, the bottom one is false. If you want to go, I'm not gonna go too in depth because this is already a pretty long tutorial. Look at the concrete tutorial, but I'll do a quick overview. So we have two options, true and false. So I call this ground only. If you click on your switch and then you go here, you can hit expose as new graph input, and then here I called it ground only. I'm gonna call it, don't put test, I'm just doing this because I already have one made. And then I'm gonna copy and I'm gonna paste it all down here. And then by default, so if we're asking ground only, is this ground only? By default it's gonna be no, because that's not gonna be ground only, because we're gonna have path, the cobblestone path. So I'm gonna say default is gonna be set to false. Okay. So now your switch, what used to be, let me spawn a brand new one. It used to look like this, where you could set true and false here, but now we've exposed it as a new graph input. So that's going to turn blue. If you ever buy a tutorial from someone or a material online and you see this blue text, that means they've created it into like a variable basically. So if you double click anywhere outside in the graph in the background, you will get this new window, right? So if you double click this guy, or not that guy, let's say anything else, you get your specific parameters. If you click outside, you basically go to like the overview of the material in a way, and any parameters that you make or booleans or whatever will be here. So if you go to preview, you can preview some of your materials, some of your exposed parameters basically. When I say exposed, this guy, if we create a normal one, this is not exposed because it's only happening within this. So if you wanted to change, between ground only and not ground only, you would have to go to this guy and hit this. And if you have multiple of these, you would have to go in and change it for all of those. But by exposing it, now if you double click outside, you can see it here, and here's where you can edit the default functionality. So you can change the name, blah blah blah, etc., etc. If you go to preview, you can actually play with them. So right now there's nothing connected to the other one, so we can't really tell. But actually no, we can't test it. So I am going to actually, let me go over here. Okay, so this one's called switch. So let me, this should be called. Now, label is what the user sees. So if you were to sell your material or whatever, this is what they will see. So ground only. The other one's just for an identifier purposes. Okay, so I'm going to delete this one because I don't need it anymore, and it was just to show you guys how to make it. So I'm going to hit, I have to go here, and then my test one, I'm going to hit the X on it. Okay, so now I'm down to 1. Okay, so I have this plugged in here where if it's not ground only, or if it's not true, then do this where it's set to false, and then do this where it's set to true. And by default, it's set to false. So by default, it's set to show this. So if I double click outside, and then I turn this on, it's going to show us it's going to remove the, our bricks, our cobblestone path. And if we double click outside and we turn it back on or off, then it comes back. And if you look here, false is this, and if I double click true, it's this. Hopefully that makes sense. That's basically what these are. And anything that I level with this red, and I also label it ground only, it's all pulling from the same boolean. So here I have 2 of them. So I shouldn't have deleted that test, but basically, if I spawn another one, because here I have 2, right? And I don't want to have to create a new boolean label identifier for every single one of them. I want them all to share. So if I turn that off, it's going to change both of these. They're going to be sharing the same thing. So if I go here and I hit this again, instead of hitting new graph input, there's an existing list down here, and I can say use this one. So now both of these guys are referencing the same boolean. So if I change this, then this one changes as well. See? So now if I turn this back off, then that one also changes because they're all calling the same boolean. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, like I said, if you need help, just mention it in the comments. Maybe somebody else will help you, or I will help you. Most likely me, because you guys are very shy. All right. Now we are going to. Oh God. All right. Let me think, because we're going to be working on. Okay, this might be a 2-parter. Let me think. You know what? No. Sorry, I forgot to mute. No, we're going to push through. We're going to hold the line, and we're going to push on through. All right. So, I'm going to make more room. We are almost done, but now we're going to be adding the, if we look back. Where is it? Not that. If we look back, now it's time to make the grass patches and the clovers. Actually, I think, you know what? I think I will break it into 2. That way, if people only are interested in the grass and the clovers. Okay. So, don't worry about connecting this to anything. This is for later uses. But I think we're going to call it here for part 1 of height. Because yeah, this just encompasses the bricks. So yeah, let me know if you guys didn't like something, you like something, if you think I'm funny, if you don't think I'm funny, if I talk too much, if I talk too little, whatever. Or if you want to just say hi. Alright, I'll see you guys on the clover and grass part next. Peace.